All right, I'm here with Parmjit, and Parmjit and I have been kind of in a partnership here for a couple of years, and one of the things that I'm really excited about is just introducing you, Parmjit, to some of my new friends who are starting to listen to these conversations as well. And yeah, we were just talking before the recording started, and I think we have a topic that we would like to explore. But before we get into topic, just want to ask the question, how are you arriving and what are you bringing today, Parmjit?
So I'm arriving. I've kind of made a conscious decision to step back a little bit from kind of meeting after meeting and just to relax into my family more and that kind of thing. But having said that, I've just come from an all-day meeting that was from a really lovely group who call themselves Weird, which I love the
Weird.
title as well. Yeah,
Okay.
I love that
Mhm,
title, and I think it speaks to young people as well.
mhm.
And so yeah, we had a morning session and then we had an afternoon session, and it was very interesting to be there. And it was lovely to see a bunch of people of all ages who were um, who were holding an intention to change to help bring the transition in,
Mhm, mhm,
and who didn't have their own like models and ideologies or whatever.
mhm, mhm.
They were at a stage where they could listen and just hold all that stuff back, which is a great, progressive thing
Mhm,
stage to be at.
mhm, mhm.
Um, but so we had some lovely conversations and dialogue, and I had a look at the kind of canvas that they're building up. But there are a couple of things that I'm bringing from that
Mhm.
into here, um, because it's always about what's alive at the moment.
Right.
And
Mhm.
so, um, coincidentally, as we were going to meet, and I was thinking I'd really like to know what Mike's views on this are.
Mhm.
So I'm bringing a couple of questions from
Okay.
that meeting.
Very good. Very good. Well, that's how this works is, we bounce questions off of each other as they emerge. What's really inspiring to me, Parmjit, is that there were a bunch of people of all age ranges at this meeting that you were at, and that they were in a place where they were kind of able to let go of their expected outcome or their ideology and open up. So that's really really inspiring to me. And I'm really looking forward to delving into what emerged from that conversation and how you're bringing that into this conversation here. Um, I'm arriving feeling very excited and curious about your decision to kind of step back from the busyness and from that. You just returned from was it Costa Rica you were in or
Ecuador.
Ecuador? You were in Ecuador. Okay, who's in Costa Rica? Someone else I know is in Costa Rica right now, but
Yeah.
yeah, but you were in Ecuador for how long?
It turned out to be 7 weeks. Yeah.
7 weeks, yeah. So yeah, I'm curious about how, that whole experience, that whole journey. And I'm jealous, by the way, because I really want to be able to travel and experience different cultures and all of that. So I'm kind of living vicariously through you, in a little bit here. And how I'm also arriving and what I'm also bringing is that you and we meet with the WINFinity core every week. And last week we had talked to a new friend of ours, Kylie, about something called kairotic flow. And I that has really inspired me and really inspired me to kind of change my approach and my language a little bit when it comes to power dynamics, and how to open up relationships, especially when those power dynamics kind of get in kind of get in the way, get in the flow of that. So that's what's very alive for me at this moment as well. Yeah, so that's what I'm bringing, a curiosity kind of to explore today's topic. And before we started the recording, you said you would like the topic to be, what are the commons? What are the commons?
Or it might be, what is the commons? I'm not
Or
really
what
sure.
is the commons? Yes,
I
exactly.
don't know. Is it this or
And
is it oh?
Yeah, and I don't know if I have I'm still exploring what that means to me as well too, because after talking to Kylie last week and after reviewing all of that material, I'm thinking of the commons as kind of like, the community in relationship to the state or in relationship to the market. So I haven't really defined what the commons means to me, but I am exploring what is the relationship of people who identify with the commons with government agencies like the state and the market, and how the market works and the competitiveness of the market. So anyway, that is what is alive in me. Just
Yeah.
first thinking about the topic, but I'm going to turn it over to you and let you ask the first question, and we'll get right into
That
this.
is kind of that is the kind of parameters of the wider question in a sense. Um, Having thought a little bit about it before coming onto the call, it struck me that um, the learning that we've both done, and that probably many other people we can include in this, has been a series of resets.
Hmm.
And you mentioned the conversation with Kylie.
Hmm.
And for us, this is another reset. The information that's presented is something that looks and feels right. And so, but it doesn't really make sense at the moment. It's kind of outside of us. And so we're looking at it going, yeah, there's something here. And that's why I like the term weird, because it is usually weird
Hmm.
when you come across kind of these things that are asking you to look at something from a different perspective.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
that's when um, there's a kind of a thing that's needed around processing and digesting.
Hmm.
What is this new information? What does it mean? How does it work? What's the language? And you mentioned that you've taken on board some of the language that's come from that.
Hmm.
And so that's something that I'm going to also need to reset
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
thinking and like how I
Mhm.
perceive things. And then that in turn will influence what the commons are, or what we perceive as the commons. But somebody else is still maybe going to be seeing something different there.
Sure. Yeah. 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 And how do we just start the conversation about it is something that comes to mind as well too. Like you've been working on, how do we begin to begin?
Yeah,
And that's been
starting
your
with the
focus. Yeah.
starting. Yeah, yeah. Um, I think I was very heartened by what I saw with the weird people,
Hmm.
if I can put it like that.
Sure. Yeah.
The weird people.
Hmm.
I'm going to send them this recording, by the way.
Sounds good. Well, we're all weird, so
Yeah,
it's okay.
it's a great thing to be.
It is a great thing to be. Yes.
Um, so, what was I going to say about it now?
Yeah, you said you had some questions that kind of came up for you after having this experience, and
Oh,
that's yeah. Mhm.
I felt that they'd got like the main points from the harvesting that they've been doing
Mhm.
over the past few years in the project that they're doing. So I felt there was a lot of alignment with like the principles
Mhm.
and all of that stuff.
Mhm.
Um, but as in real life, there's always going to need to be um, a process of reset
Mhm.
and kind of what language you're using and so on.
Mhm.
And it's not like there's a switch and then everybody kind of
Yeah.
sees the same thing
Yeah.
either. It kind of happens at different times for different people.
Yes. Hmm.
And as in real life, there was like a mixture. There was a diversity there from
Hmm.
people who were fresh from kind of an institutional way of doing things
Hmm.
and people who had maybe been delving into stuff a little bit more.
Hmm. Hmm.
And so one of the other questions, well, is it a question? It's like a difference of perception
Hmm.
in a similar way to what is the commons or what are the commons,
Hmm.
was the question around unity
Right. Okay.
and how that impacts diversity.
Okay. Hmm.
And so I feel that the mainstream view is that there's some kind of relationship that when you have unity, you have less diversity.
Hmm. Hmm.
But my view is that you have more diversity
Hmm.
when you have unity. So I thought that would be, I want to know what you think about that too. That would be
Hmm.
fun to throw around.
Yeah, yeah. No, that's something that I've been reflecting on for a couple of years actually, Parmjit. Because to me, what has emerged is there's a difference between the idea of unity and the idea of harmony. Um, where to me, the term unity, I think a lot of people associate with conformity. That doesn't necessarily mean it implies conformity, but some people, when they hear that word unity, they think of like globalization and they think of forced conformity. So that it's kind of like this concept now where it's kind of like the Borg from Star Trek. We will assimilate you, and we'll do the thinking for you, and all of that. So to me, that's not what unity is. But in having deeper conversations, especially with people who are very resistant to the mainstream, they do associate the term unity with that kind of conformity. In those conversations, what has also come up is also the word harmony, where the idea of harmony is that we can all play diverse notes, we can all be at different places and still create a beautiful sound while maintaining our individuality. So for some people, this idea of harmony is a little more resonate. It resonates a little bit more than the term unity. So it's completely to me it's completely semantics. It's this idea of how do we work together? How do we deepen relationships so that we can honor each other's differences and still accomplish the common goal, which is to improve the quality of life on this planet. So that's what comes up for me when considering this idea of unity. Is that I think there's the need for the deeper conversation to kind of take apart what does that mean to you? What could that look like for you? Where are there disconnects? Where are you perceiving? And in a lot of my conversations with people who are resistant, where are you perceiving that there's going to be power struggle? Where are you perceiving that some of your rights and freedoms are going to be taken away? So I think it invites the deeper conversation because I think in a lot of ways, especially politically, I think this idea of unity makes a lot of presumptions. Like, if I want something for my life, I make these assumptions that, well, of course you're going to want that for your life. Like let's say, someone who's in business and they want to make a profit and all that, and they want to make more money. Their mentality is, well, of course you want to make more money and more profit too, because I want to. let's unify. So that's
Yeah.
where that market mentality comes in, and it clashes with that commons mentality, where what I perceive, as the commons is, how do we lift the entire community up so that everybody finds their natural place and it flows more. Where I feel like the market is this drive for superiority, which is kind of like a different goal than what I perceive the commons, as we come together as the commons really wants. So it's this idea of, really looking at, this idea of superiority, and is it really relevant in our global narrative right now? So yeah, so that's what comes up for me in response to that question.
Okay, so what you're saying then
Mhm,
is that unity in the present world that's not weird
mhm,
um, is more what we could think of as it's kind of like the old mindset of collaboration,
mhm,
and that doesn't mean the same thing
mhm,
to the weird world as it would in the mainstream world either.
mhm, mm,
Um, and so the similarities and differences are that in the mainstream world, it's hierarchical and competitive. So you have like a triangular structure with a hierarchy.
mhm,
And the profit model um, is that the people at the top with the power tend to have the money, so they tend to have more power, so they tend to have more money, and so
mhm,
on. And unity in that world would be propagating that model.
mhm,
But over here, where everybody's weird, um, see, this is what's happening is that people are saying the right things in
mhm.
the canvassy stuff,
Yeah.
like no competition, da, 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 da. But then the implications for what that kind of means
Mhm,
for concepts like unity, collaboration, those steps haven't really been worked out.
mhm,
And so this is what's causing, like, so what do we mean exactly by the commons, and what do we mean exactly by unity? And
mhm,
so when people offer up what's the relationship between unity and diversity, they straight away assume there's like a tension there.
yeah. Yeah.
Whereas actually, one of the things I really loved
Mhm,
was that, and it wasn't me, it was one of the members, said, what we need is good facilitation. Yes.
WINFinityFramework.com, everyone. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah, we're getting there in kind of fits and starts, like the car keeps on kind of starting and cutting out and spluttering a little bit. But I think we've got the car, or we've got the concept of, I think we're getting the concept of we're co-creating the car.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah.
And
So,
because
so
we've only had old cars
yeah.
before,
Yeah. 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 How to adapt to the new car that we're creating. What the question that emerges for me, Parmjit, and I had to come back to the moment to stay with you and listen. I have because there was a question that emerged just a moment ago. The question that emerges for me to ask you is, we've all been in that place of flow. We've all been in that place where we feel like things are moving very well, and then all of a sudden the momentum stops. Something happens where it feels like it stops or it slows down. Why do you think that flow? What happens to that flow? Why do you think it's difficult for people to understand how to engage in that flow with each other.
So I'm going to be quite straight up here in that you have been trying to introduce this concept of the time bank. And we've had multiple conversations. And it's only after that that kind of concept really started to sink in for me. And so while I can get frustrated, like sometimes if the other person hasn't quite caught up with this, and it's, well, sometimes it's both, to be honest. And while I'm talking, I'm kind of realizing it is both, because the profit bit is the private bit. And so we're still going to have that. And the commons bit is the non-competitive. Let me cut your grass while you come and clean my windows or whatever. And but it's about the relationships between each and the other. And so there's something about what's the framework that's going to allow for those hiccupy moments where people aren't quite getting it. Like how do we hold that the space till like penny kind of drops? And sometimes it drops in a way because of other experiences and everything's clear. Sometimes it drops in a way like I'm beginning to get it, but I need to observe like the difference between this and this.
Yes. Yep. It's almost, go ahead, keep going.
Yeah, so that's my thoughts around when there's a stuckness. Sometimes there's a third reason, and the third reason is because things aren't ready yet, like things are kind of lining up in the universe somewhere.
Right.
Yeah. And then further down the road, when you kind of thought, well, that's never going to happen, it's suddenly, stuckness becomes unstuck.
Yeah, what I'm hearing too as well is that there's that dynamic between, the heart center of what feels right, what feels like there's a flow, and the brain, which kind of, wants to understand it so much that it almost gets in the way. It almost tries to take it apart before it has a chance to really understand what it's about. That's where we get into that idea of, if you're explaining, you're not exploring. So it's almost like it's that people are uncomfortable. They get to a point where the exploring feels uncomfortable, and they have to pull back and try to explain, what they've seen so far and try to make sense of it first before they can explore anymore. So there's that kind of like that dynamic where that if they can't explain it, there's almost like an insecurity or a discomfort around it, I think. And that's very understandable. And I found myself there quite often in the last 10 years or so. Yeah. So based on what you just offered and based on what I just reflected back, let that lead you to the next question. What's the next question you'd like to ask me?
Before I ask the question, I just want to offer up that there are things that we need to learn to like drop. So that's been, I think, for both of us, because we've known each other for a number of years, and like some of the frustrations that come with why aren't they getting this time bank thing? Or for me, it might be, I'm not getting your time bank thing, but there's some stuff I am getting, but the other person isn't getting.
Hmm.
And I'm like, why aren't they getting that thing? It's so obvious.
Hmm. Hmm.
Um, and it's kind of, I think I've worked through a lot of that now. Um, and I've learned why it's important and how things work much better if I'm not giving my opinion about something, even if it's like super well informed.
Right, right, yeah.
It doesn't do any good.
Hmm.
And so
Yeah.
these are examples where it's learning by trying it and seeing it's not working, and then seeing that actually when I keep my opinion to myself, or
Hmm.
when I'm listening from a different energy,
Hmm. Hmm.
something different happens, and so on.
Yeah, yeah. I'd like to reflect back something too, because this came up in a conversation that I've been having with Randy, who was the man that I had one of these conversations with a while ago. Is that what a lot of us are feeling kind of a resistance towards is people coming in and giving us advice, or people coming in and teaching us something. And really what it's about is how do we come back to this place of exploring and discovering together. So like when trying to explain something like a time bank, or trying to explain something like reverse market mechanics, I keep going back to this experience that I've always had as an acting teacher. So when I was in college, I learned this technique where where the partners would repeat back to each other something banal or something mundane, just like an observant about, like, you're wearing a pink shirt or something like that, and you would just repeat that back and forth until it changes. And so many actors were frustrated with this and did not see the value in it. um, and the thing is, the point of it was to solicit an emotion like that, solicit that kind of a feeling, that emotion, that's how you start to get it to be real. That's how you start to get real, is to express that frustration over it. But most people would not work through that, and they would give up on the technique, and they didn't see it as having any value. I built my entire teaching career around that technique, and it came to the point where I couldn't lecture about it. I couldn't tell anybody what the benefit was. All I could do is create the space and let people experience it, and then have an honest conversation about it, because after the experience, then we could have an intelligent conversation, and then we can kind of go into the situation, go into the technique again with a little bit of a different perspective. And that's how you deepen, kind of the ability to be able to observe, to listen, and be real. To let the feelings come up and let yourself express it, not holding them down, not suppressing it. So that's kind of like, I feel like that was kind of like my first experience into this world of emergent strategy, where I can't explain it to you. We just have to have the experience, and then we can record the experience, and then we can go back and have an intelligent conversation about it. But that's what I think a lot of people are resistant to. They're afraid to try something new because they're so used to being told what to do. They're so used to being told exactly what the benefits are. They want the security. They want to be able to have, they want to be able to know what's going on. They want to, what's the word I'm looking for? But they want the security.
Yeah.
They want the sense of, they want a certainty. They want the sense of certainty. And to be put into a position where it is uncomfortable, and you are observing, and you are growing, as that emergent information comes in. That's one of the most uncomfortable things for people who are so used to being in a hierarchy, where you're told you just do this and this, and then you'll progress to the next level. Um,
Yeah.
and that's the difference between the chronos time and the kairos time. What's alive is the kairotic flow, with being able to
Yeah.
relate. So anyway, that was something that came up for me. as you were describing that, being in those emergent spaces is very uncomfortable when you're used to authority telling you what to do and how to think.
I think the thing about that is that, again, there's diversity there.
Mm-hmm.
Like there are some people, a bit like your little girl Eloise, who want to do it themselves. They want to think, they want to, have adventures and explore and learn. And then there are other people who are quite happy in that space,
Mm-hmm.
being told that actually sustainability and climate is all about recycling your bottles, and as long as you do that, you're all right.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's there's so much diversity around that. It can be difficult to find a point of reference. So, for example, the climate, I'm going to call them the climate change group in my city, have asked me if I could be in their group because I made some comments about the strategy and where they were going with it. I mean, in reality, truth be told, I don't agree with the premise that they're starting with, which is that we need to measure carbon dioxide. Because that's a little bit like recycle your plastic bottles and everything will be okay.
Yeah, right.
Now, they're not stupid or anything. They're highly intelligent and they've done all these predictions and they've got all this data about emissions and So I haven't decided what would my relationship with them be. I haven't decided what my reply is going to be. And it's like, if I went in and said, I don't agree with the premise that you have to measure carbon dioxide, it's actually about creating viable, ecosystems in terms of finance as well as social ecosystems.
Right.
I have a feeling they probably would nod, but then they would go back into their
right
thing about let's measure some carbon dioxide.
Yeah. What comes up for me around that, Parmjit, and this kind of ties back into what Kylie had presented and the kairotic flow, is that kind of there's, with diversity and diversity of opinions and diversity of solutions comes complexity, and with complexity, that's kind of when the flow gets cut off, and that's where power becomes corrupt because it doesn't flow more. So it's kind of like, instead of having your perspective be at odds with their perspective, how do the two perspectives weave together? And that's what, I mean, I don't want to get too much into language here in this conversation, or too much into the language that, that we're starting to explore here at WINFinity. But it's kind of like there's that difference between the pioneers and the settlers, who are trying to implement a certain way that they know or they think is going to be the best way. But we're back here as curators and as scouts, saying, well, wait a minute, there's a different, there's something more to this. There's something that that you're not quite seeing. And it's unfortunate and it's uncomfortable for us because, we're trying to find ways to come across as not being confrontational, because, some of the things I'd like to say is, well, there's something you're not seeing. And just to come out and say that kind of almost invites debate or invites controversy. And I was like, no, I'm not trying to contradict what you're working on. I'm trying to bring another dimension to it, bring in diversity. And how do we tie in these strategies together so that we're not at odds with each other all the time. Yeah, so it's kind of like there's still and I think that ties back into this idea of the commons and this idea of a market, because like the climate change and all kinds of activists, they're in marketing mode where they're trying to convince us that their way is the best way, and that's the power of the market, is how to convince. But over here in the commons, we're saying, well, wait a minute, we're taking inventory of different perspectives here, so can we all create almost more of a democratic, almost like a democratic way of exploring all of these solutions and finding how we can weave them together effortlessly. I think that's what I mean. That might be the function of the commons. I don't know, but yeah, it seems like that they're still in that world of the market, and we're exploring this world of the commons. And how do we bring those worlds together when the mentality is so different? So it's the difference between that masculine, linear, objective goal setting of the market, where we're kind of trying to explore the relationship, the circular thinking, the interconnectedness, even the emotional aspect of it. So it's kind of like, yeah, it's kind of like how can those worlds coexist without making anybody right or wrong, but blending and weaving. You know?
Yeah, that has been another question I've been holding space to gain clarity, which is how do you show a different perspective and offer an opportunity to level up the game in like how something can be perceived in a wider, broader sense without making somebody wrong.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And we've fallen, and I credit kind of patriarchal structures for this, and also feudalism, and this making kind of like war and conflict kind of like the centerpiece of the ideology. It's kind of like debate almost seems to me like it's a conversation to invalidate feelings and experiences, where conversations, collaboration is about validating each other's perspective and finding the intersections. So yeah, so that's an inside job. I mean, I don't know, and I don't think I want it to be a thing where it has to be enforced, or it has to be structured to make people look within and change that dynamic. I think it's an inside job that almost has to come from destruction leading to creation, where those who are so set on doing things their way and so set on making everything a competitive debate, well, maybe there needs to be a few implosions before we can start to rebuild from the inside out.
Yeah. So do you feel that it's worthwhile to spend time trying to put like characteristics within those three areas, state, private, and commons? Or do you feel that it's better to just focus on the commons piece? Because my feeling is that the state piece is more about, oh, okay, let me ask you this question.
Okay,
It's kind of connected to where I was going there.
great.
So the question is the commons for people who have helped to create the commons? Or is it for everybody?
Mm, mm. I think it is for everybody. That's my first inclination, is to say that, because what what I'm hallucinating, what I'm guessing at, is that there really is not a separation between commons and state and market. Um, and this has come from having a lot of frustrating conversations with business people and marketers and people in that world. Um, because the more the more we try to convince others that building up the commons is good, is life affirming, the more resistance there is to that, because at some point, if that truth gets accepted, and I'm thinking specifically, you know, in the realm of the market, they're going to have to take a look internally and really, really do some heavy inventory about some of the darker aspects, some of the corruption, some of the, some of the lives that have been really hurt and destroyed and exploited, so that the market could exist. And then that spills into the state, where it feels like the state is not so much a body for maintaining and for caring. It's more like an extension of the market, where it's about competition and about winning and about profit. Um, so I think it is for everybody, because and this is one of my opinions, which is not very popular, but it's something that I feel is a way forward. When um, when there is a lot of money involved and somebody is in a position of power, and that power is not shared, it really does take a toll on the mental health of the person. Um, I mean, I've been talking for a couple years now about acquired sociopathy, where somebody is in a position where they have so much power and they can do what they want when they want. It almost cuts you off of your own empathy, of your own emotions, and we see examples of children being tortured, of countries being bombed, of starvation that's not necessary, all to protect the profits of someone who already has power. And that's kind of where there's been a kind of like a saturation of power in that realm of the market. And why the language we used last week was that there is kind of like a dry spout. There's almost like there's almost like a drought in the commons, because there's so much of a saturation, of power that is not really flowing anymore. And I almost feel like, when we're thinking in terms of the relationship between the commons, the market, and the state, I feel like because of all the power that has amassed in the market, it's sucking the state up into it as well too.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that there is not really democracy. Democracy is a nice dream, and I think we can get there, but it's still an illusion, when you
Yeah.
consider the power dynamics that I know you and I have explored. So yeah, but
Yeah.
I believe it is
Yeah.
for everybody, especially when it comes to the mental and emotional health of even the people at the top.
Of everybody, because yeah, what's happening in the state and private sector is affecting everybody, including those in the private sector who are working all hours and all the rest of it. Um, there was something, two or three different things were going through my mind as examples, but I think I'll give this one, just to add to what you were saying. One of the post-it notes on the canvas was about safety, the importance of safety, and what is safety and how do we achieve safety, which I thought was a very good point, but it's something that people with the knowledge kind of education that they've had would not really, most people would not be in a position to be able to address that or know how to begin to answer it. And what I wanted to say, and I didn't have time to say it within the event, and maybe it wouldn't have been the right kind of energy to offer up, but seeing as we're going a little bit on the darker side, is that, and then we'll come back out of it in a bit. But the answer to that post-it about, what is safety and how do we achieve it is, well, think about who's running the state and who's running the private sector with the kind of unhealthy intertwining of the power and the money dynamic.
Yeah.
It's complete sociopaths who never would get a sense of safety. And so they need to keep on being in control by making the other person or the other group or the other country weaker than they are, and always being in a position where they're calling the shots and creating diversions and creating bifurcations and people get very confused with the whole thing around fake news. And I can understand why that can be really confusing, but to run to the state and private sector to fact check, I'm not sure that's completely the right thing to do, bearing in mind the power dynamics there. So with that said, let's move on to something lighter.
Well, well, I'm going to put the ball back in your court, Parmjit. Who did ask the last question? I think you did. So, why don't I spin the next question now based on what you had just offered too. So, what I'm hearing is that, we're touching on some uncomfortable area now. We're touching on something that, is considered dark. Can we explore what is light without first acknowledging what's in the dark? That's my question to you. Can we lighten up? Can we get back to something that is lighter without really being honest and exploring what's in the dark?
At one point, I thought that the answer was no, we all need to explore the dark. But now I would say we don't all need to explore the dark, because I can see enough movement where people are saying that doesn't make sense, but this does. And I can see enough willingness to, I can see enough like curiosity, natural curiosity. And I think as long as we've got those kinds of characteristics, we will find the light, actually, without all having to be aware of everything to do with the dark. And it takes us to the unification, diversity kind of thing again, and all the things we've been talking about. Things are going to, the penny will drop for different people in different areas, but there's a key set of principles, or there's a key kind of set of characteristics that are milestones or indicators, maybe indicators, that things are going in the right direction. And broadly speaking, going in the right direction is about emulating how nature gets to be so generative and provides everything for everyone, because there's an ecosystem. And so at the moment where we are is that we're in this car that's kind of half going and half spluttering because we're still transitioning from what was to
Mhm,
what is going to be. And we're
mhm,
still learning about that. Now, it's the people within, I think there's two sets of commons, perhaps there's more, but there's the active commons where people are really focused and have intent because they want another kind of car.
mhm, mhm,
And then there's the people who are like, well, I'm just going to toddle along in the car I'm used to. But when the other car gets made,
mhm,
then everyone's going to be obviously
mhm,
driving the super Batmobile, flying, all singing cars. That is going to
mhm,
be something that the commons, the active, learning people
mhm,
in
mhm,
the commons would have co-create together. Some of them would be aware of some of the dark stuff,
mhm,
and
mhm,
others, may well not be.
mhm.
Uh, different degrees. But I certainly don't think everybody needs to be dragged through all of that stuff
Yeah,
to make a nice car.
yeah, yeah.
So, so what I'm saying is there's the commons of people who are focused and will then manifest, co-create something that's
Mhm,
working much better in nature as nature. And then there's the commons that, as a result of that, now everybody has kind of food and energy, and if they want to um, have a step up in terms of perspectives and stuff, there's going to be lots of stuff available.
mhm.
If they don't, that's fine, they can carry on. So maybe we're looking at like the two, maybe there's more levels, I don't know.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah, yeah. What really was coming up strongly for me as you were sharing, Parmjit, was looking at my desire and my intention to to explore the dark, and what are my expectations of others as far as acknowledging what's in the dark. That's been a lifelong journey, so that's emergent for me as well too. What also what also came up for me as well too is really, I think, creating an interrelationship, between those entities. I think, what I heard about the commons, or what I'm processing at this moment about the commons, is, how can the commons facilitate better relationships between itself, the state, and the market. And I think that's where its greatest asset really is it's the ability to integrate that diversity, and to be able to, to hold the conversation. And for some people, like, acknowledging that darkness is a necessary part of the journey, but transmuting it and making it light, making it something that, that will create that new car for everybody, that works better for everyone, I think is necessary. But yeah, I this that put me you put me in a little bit of a very reflective place now, because especially in the last couple of weeks, and it's kind of culminating here in this conversation, is, reevaluating my expectations of people's ability and desire to understand that dark. So yeah, so thank you for that. So anyway, that's my reflection, and I'll let you spin the last question, and we'll end here in about 7 minutes or so.
There are a couple of things that came up for me um, just now. So what were they? I've lost the thread now.
That's okay. And I do want to emphasize
Feeling.
that pauses are okay.
Mm.
I don't with like recordings and podcasts, there's this habit and there's this propaganda that says, you have to keep the conversation going. There should be no dead air. Or take
Yeah,
take a
we've done
moment,
pretty well
breathe.
actually.
Take a moment, breathe, catch up to everything that's percolating right
Mm.
here and just let what comes out. Because I think that's part of the way we change the dynamic is, competitive market, wants us to keep going forward and fast and no dead air. Slow down, take a beat,
Yeah,
catch up,
absolutely.
and I think just changing the cadence of the conversation changes the entire dynamic. So. So yeah.
Thank you.
So take a moment. I'm going to take a drink here.
So actually, one of the things was, I think that the commons, the state is the admin part of the commons. And so the commons will be co-creating their own state
Mm,
because they they will be working through, or we will be working through together. Um, what are the forms that we need? What shape do things need to take so that we have a nature-led
mhm,
way of doing things? What does
mhm,
that mean? What's most important? How do we address stuff around like the conversation that we've just had about safety and the dark side, if you like. Um, that, okay, so everybody doesn't need to be dragged through all the yucky stuff,
mhm,
but what they do need to do is look at their own kind of shadow stuff and process stuff and
mm,
kind of reorientate. And that's what, we've had quite a long journey of reorientating, resetting,
mhm.
um, toddling along and then come across something else and you stop and go, yeah, didn't know about that. So let's have another reset. So that's kind of about knowledge becoming embodied because
Mhm.
you're paying attention to it. And part of the process is about dealing with your own shadows, your own need to be right, your own kind of why isn't that person getting it, frustration stuff.
Mhm.
So, they're the kind of shadows that we all need to be addressing if we're
Yeah.
going to get this car the right kind of car.
Mm, mhm. Yeah. Yeah. Start with your own shadow. Start with
Yeah,
your
and
own
then
blind spots. Yeah.
once we watch ourselves going through that process, we will understand what the admin side needs to admin.
Yeah. Yeah. Mhm. And build new structures, for it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
what's kind of needed to kind of get there because we would have been going through it, looking at ourselves going through it.
Yeah. 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 And to build a new structure, and I I have this conversation often. At what point is there too much structure, and at what point is there too much freedom? What just dawned on me as you were speaking just now, Parmjit, is that if we're stepping outside of the established structure and being in uncertainty for a little bit, we find ways to create new structure. We build out the new structure, and I think that's what's very much alive and emergent for me is right now because I see a structure and I see the structure and it's just not explicit yet. It's just not explicit, like the six conversations or like the six archetypes of kairotic flow. These are things that in our world we understand, and for me it provides a sense of structure. But for someone who's just discovering it for the first time, it's a whole different world, and it feels like it's complete chaos and it's complete confusion. But there are it is, to me, it is structure, and we're just kind of building it out now as we have these moments of uncertainty together and making sense of it, practicing sense making.
Yeah, and perhaps it's something to do with how do you feel when you're presented with, here's a structure of how to have a conversation, here's a structure of how roles can be things that you do your bit and pass the baton on,
Mhm, mhm,
with the kairotic flow model, which I'm
mhm,
still learning.
mhm,
And so is there a sense of, oh, goody, here's something that I need to kind of go through the process of learning, and then because for me, each time I kind of had that reset or
mhm,
what have you, I've actually felt more powerful.
mm,
Like,
mm,
oh, I've no longer got the need to keep pointing out the dark side to people, or,
yeah.
you know, all of that kind of stuff. Or
Mhm,
I've no longer, got the need for that person to see
mhm,
commons as I do, or
yeah.
whatever it is.
Mhm, mhm.
Um, there's actually a power each time you give up something.
Yes, absolutely there is. Yes. Yes. Yep.
um,
So as we wrap up this conversation, Parmjit, is there anybody who might be watching this? Is there any kind of experience that you would like to invite others into? What is the highest outcome that you would like to see, that you would like to experience, as a result of this
um,
conversation?
I would like to see a commons, as that's the theme we've kind of focused on, a place where if somebody's got no interest at all in kind of what's happening politically, or even if they've got no interest in, say, climate change or whatever it is, that we don't throw up our hands in horror, that
Mhm,
we don't kind of say, oh, this is the thing to do or the way to think or whatever.
mhm,
We just kind of say, you want to spend your time whittling pieces of wood and making them into models of animals? Brilliant. Here's a space. Off you go and do that.
mhm, mhm,
You want to spend your time, um, I don't know, doing art and what have you? Great.
mhm,
You do that. Oh, you want kind of to really understand some stuff about, democracy and all of that kind of stuff. No, don't read a book. Find a group,
mhm,
have
mhm.
some dialogue,
Yeah.
talk
Yeah.
about, throw those ideas around. Um, so like everybody doesn't have to do anything really,
Mhm, mhm,
but
mhm,
we have created a space where those people that are really curious about how to make things better
mhm,
and find the tools that they need when they need them,
mhm, mhm,
address the things that are like, oh, I didn't know that.
mhm.
But it doesn't have to be dark stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'll piggyback on top of that, Parmjit, as well too. My desire is to point people in the direction of the conversations that we have recorded over the last year. That's a part of the 2x2 algorithm, and that we can change the value of the time that we spend together. So we just spent this hour, talking about the relationship, with the commons and the state, and the market. That has value, and it can even have market value. But I want to point people in the direction of, okay, well, how do we start that conversation so that we change the power dynamic, we change the financial flow, by looking at numbers a little bit differently, so that, like, the hour we spent together, someone might have just spent an hour watching our conversation. Okay, that could have been, it could have been very beneficial for them to listen and to watch us, converse like this. They might also know that that hour that they just spent could be worth, could be worth a liquid asset, could be worth monetary value, if they follow the path that we've set, especially throughout the last year. So it's kind of like in my last conversation with Amelia Duran, I said, I'm not concerned anymore with trying to get people to get it or to convince them. We've already left the trail, and my highest outcome is I would like people to, if they found today's conversation intriguing, take a look at the 2x2 algorithm. Take a look at WINFinity Framework. I'll be linking up the WINFinity website to this conversation as well. So there's whole worlds to explore, and my highest outcome is that I would love to talk to more people who care, who just care about diversity, who care about building